Bride Quarterly's Slush Pile podcast. Feels like it's been a while since we did one, but I guess we're still doing them every other week. I have my sexy back in my voice, and I wish I could say it was something like really exciting, like, I don't know. I have a hookah problem or something. But really, I think it's just sweat and air conditioning. I think that pattern has finally caught up with me. So excuse my raspiness. I can maybe take it down an octave.
Oh, that does sound so sexy.
I like this alternative. That's good.
Okay, I'll try to go that way. So we're here in McAllister in our cinder block room rather than the audio studio again, but it's okay. We're motoring along here. I'd like to go around the table and see who's here today. There's me. We'll start with me. I'm Kathleen Volk. I'm an essayist and director of the graduate program here in publishing. And that's all I'll say about me. And to my left is...
Hi, I'm Lauren Patterson. I'm a recent Drexel grad and a former PBQ editorial co-op.
My name is Tim Fitz, and I've been reading for the Painted Bride Quarterly for about 3 years now, and I teach at Temple, Drexel, Penn State, Curtis, story writer, and novelist.
Woohoo!
And I'm Caitlin McLaughlin. I am the digital communications co-op for Drexel Publishing Group. This is my last week, which is sad. And I've been reading with PBQ for about 9 months, and I'm an English major.
Yes, indeed. Okay, and out there in the wider world, we have Jason up in New York.
Hi, I am coming to you from my office in Tribeca. I am associate editor at Painted Bride Quarterly. I think I've been part of the staff for going on like 15 years. And my office is lovely. I'm a professor at the Borough of Manhattan Community College, and I'm the author of 3 books of poems and the editor of 1 anthology.
Wonderful. Hi, Marion.
Hi, it's Marion Wrenn here with greetings from Abu Dhabi, where it's 8 o'clock at night, sitting at my kitchen table with my kooky cat and my cuckoo clock. And it is so hot and humid here. It's staggering. It really does feel like you're in a terrarium. And so I have very, very much deep and enduring sympathy for that cold that you have going from sweat to air conditioning. But be that as it may, I'm here and I can't wait to hear what we have to say about the work tonight. So yay.
Okay, so for new listeners and to remind everyone else, you can follow along with these poems on our podcast pages at pbq.drexel.edu. If you'd like to read them first, read them later, whatever you'd like, they're available to you. Today we're going to read 2 poems by Sarah Gutowski. So you know, these are long prose poems and they're a suite. We cannot possibly read the entire suite to you. So we've chosen 2 to discuss this episode, and we'll discuss the other off air in a regular editorial meeting, and we'll keep you posted on the results on that. So these are really fun and intense and narrative, and I would love to hear for me to not read. It's the Abu Dhabi Cuckoo Clock!
Yay!
So long. What great timing on the Cuckoo Clock.
You know what? And it couldn't be more perfect. The cuckoo clock's chiming, my cat's talking to it, and I would love to read this poem.
Perfect.
So this is called Chapter 6, The Children Have a Request. The season stretched itself thin, weakened by storms and heat. Inside the damp, shadowy space of the children's fort, the woman with the frog tongue wove baskets and bowls with tight interlocked laces, while her silk stitches began to fray and lengthen. The gap between her lips widened to where the children could see the white of her teeth. They stared at her, sometimes She saw them clench their jaws and try to speak to each other without moving their mouths. Before long, they'd begin to laugh, and she'd shake with relief at the sound. Then one day, when the trees broke into glittering shards of gold and red and green, and light spun pinwheels above their heads as they walked together between the falling leaves, the girl looked at the woman and asked if she had a name. At this, the woman jerked to a stop. The old surge, the impulse to speak that rose within her belly and chest, overwhelmed. She wanted the girl and boy to know her name. Her tongue rolled tightly and barred from moving inside its cage, strained against her teeth and cheeks, contorting her face with its rage. The boy stepped back when he saw the change on the woman's face. The girl moved closer, though, to pat the hand she held like she might a frightened kitten or skittish fallen bird. "Let's guess your name," she said. The woman's jaw fell slack, as much as the stitches allowed. Her panic passed away. The boy saw her relax and began to hop around. A game, he chanted. Across her eyes, the sun sliced its blade, and though her vision bled with its light, she felt cheered by the girl's hand and the boy's excitement. Aurora, Jezebel, Seraphina, guessed the girl. Her brother laughed and grabbed a fallen branch, whacking the moss-covered roots of the trees surrounding them. The woman laughed too, short bursts of air through her nose. Her happiness shocked them all. The boy laughed again, a raucous sound, and she looked the girl in the eye. A curve tested her mouth's seams, more grimace than grin. But the girl smiled back and sighed with some relief. Then she reached toward the woman and pulled her close until they were cheek to cheek. The girl's face, cold and smooth, smelled of moss and earth. Her brother lashed and whipped with vigor into the air. The woman with the frog tongue hugged the girl loosely, as if those little shoulder blades were planes of cloud, a shifting mist she could see and feel between her arms, but couldn't collect or hold or keep for her very own. The girl stepped back, yet kept her hands by the woman's face. Her small, thin fingers hovered before the fraying threads. "Why don't you take these out?" she asked, as she touched each ragged end. At this, the boy stopped his joyful assault of the trees and ran to see for himself what they discussed each night when walking home. Her muffled, choked murmurings, the gray lattice unraveling across her mouth. He peered closely at each loose stitch, searching beyond her lips for whatever monster they'd locked so poorly inside. He found no monster, just a hint of pink tongue. So he shrugged, said, "Yes," and spun on his heel to resume his game. The girl jumped up and down, shouting, "And then you'll tell us your name." The woman watched the boy whip tree roots free of moss, the tuft spinning into the air and separating, becoming dust, the dark green spores like beaks of birds that plummet toward the rocky earth without fear. She watched the girl's hair lift and fly away from her head, the wind dividing its strands, the way it hung, suspended like dust in the sun, then sank like spores, a sudden drop. She worked her mouth from side to side and by degrees opened her lips enough to burble a sound that said, "Maybe."
Wow, that was a lot of work. Thank you, Marion.
Oh, you know what? That was super fun to read. I felt like I was reading a children's story to a library full of kids.
Yeah, no. It was really very, very beautifully done. You read with great intensity and yeah, what a fun thing to be immersed in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's really dense. I mean, it's amazingly dense. I kind of wanted to ask you guys about the form, because I felt like, these sort of these really big stanzas with these really long lines. It was really hard. I mean, and some of it is, I think, my own problem where I just have to read so much that I get used to reading quickly.
Yeah.
And when I have to read slowly.
Absolutely.
It's hard. But there's also a way in which the poem was kind of making itself even denser. Like in using that form, it was kind of like like this would be much easier to read as a story that was double spaced, or much easier to read in kind of smaller stanzas with smaller lines. And I kind of wanted to ask what you guys thought about that decision to kind of keep this really kind of dense, demanding piece.
You know what? Let me jump in and say, I think for me, that's part of the surprise of the poem, because when I first looked at it, I was like, oh, this is going to be really tough, right? And is this going to be one of those poems that means to be a short story, but just doesn't realize it's meant to be a short story, which we often see in some of the Slush Pile stuff. But I think the surprise of this is the craft of this density and the universe that gets created in these really like sort of robust, 9-line stanzas that are full of this rich, very specific language that frankly slows you down. Like it forces you to read it slowly. So it's doing this whole thing with my sense of time and attention that I really loved. I really loved that experience.
Yeah. And it never got boring either, which is such a feat for a long poem. I always find when I'm reading them aloud or listening to them, sometimes my mind will wander, but my attention was kept the whole time, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah. I love both of your use of attention, because I think that's exactly it. Jason, I think I kind of lost the question that you asked, though. Could you see this in a different form?
I don't think I could. I mean, I actually really like what I'm calling difficulty. And I don't think it's actually that difficult. I think it's just like my bad attention span. I kept picking this up. I sort of kept putting it down and kept going back to it. And I actually really respect the fact that it wouldn't let me read it until I was going to read it on its own terms.
Yes.
Right? Like, okay, yeah. That it really insisted on me, really doing nothing else but going at the pace it wanted me to go and paying attention to what was happening, because the story was also so weird, right? I mean, it's kind of taking these really familiar tropes, but, I say to my student, a lot of times my students will see me speed reading because, like I took a speed reading class, and you can do that where you you have like your fingers in a little line, you just go across the page really fast. But I always say to them, you can only do that if you already know what you're going to be reading.
Yeah.
Right. Like the minute anything surprises you, or the minute something is saying something to you that you didn't expect it to say, you can't speed. You have to slow down. And so that was like, I'm not saying that I want it to be in a different structure, but I just really want to like kind of talk about the demand that it makes in a positive way. Like, I mean, I don't want to say demanding or difficult as negative qualities of literature. I kind of want to talk about them as positive qualities of literature, but also ones that like I'm not confronted with as much as, when I was an undergraduate and I didn't have a television and I didn't read the news and there was no social media. And, every day what I was really focused on was like kind of dense, heavy literature, and my attention span was built around that. And now when I'm like, switching back and forth between emails and, I have a meeting that I have to be at in an hour, and I've put together a mail merge so that I can have people sign up, like I have like logistics brain right now, and I have email brain, and I have social media brain. And I really respect this poem for kind of not letting me bring those brains, for saying, no, until you get back into your Faulkner brain, like, until you get back into your Morris brain, like I will not yield to you.
Yeah. That is a great way to talk about it. Did you really start to read the poem and then realize it wasn't a good time and get out?
Oh yeah. Like I had this on my desk for like a week, and every time I picked it up, I would just start like freaking out about, other things on the list. And it was just like, I can't do this now. I can't do this now. I can't keep this kind of attention. So yeah, it was actually like really, I mean, I was in the wrong spaces. Like, I mean, you kind of have to be in, I don't know, like a library or like, just there.
But I'm glad to hear you talk about it in this way, because I think that was part of my grabby pleasure in reading it. And I'm so glad I got to read it, because I think it's also playing with this sort of false binary between literacy and orality, right? Like this is such a poem for the page, but Lord, reading it out loud reminds me of the joy of telling a story to a group of people. Like it feels like a scary story. It's meant to be told aloud, read aloud, like a sort of children's, image book, something that you read as a bedtime story, but that is an oral experience, right? And I mean, both, oral O with and AU, like it's in your ears as much as it's, out of my mouth. And I think that's part of the specialness of this too, because that does feel like a different brain to bring, right, to our immediate lives,
Yeah, let's lift the veil even further on our process. Marion and I discussed whether or not these would work on a podcast.
Yeah.
We were already really respecting the work, really getting into the work, having a little bit, we call our side meetings Klingon Council. We were having a wee bit of Klingon Council. Did I say too much, Mare? That our dark?
No.
I tried for Klingon Council with Double Doctor, and I have never succeeded.
But we were a little trepidatious about hearing them, but that reading you just gave really was fabulous. I think our, listeners, please let us know how it went for you. I feel like if I was driving or commuting or walking or anything else I do when I listen to podcasts, I would have just been, right in there with you and hanging on every word.
Yeah.
It was there. But that's, you know what? I'm so glad you reminded us of that, debate, right? Which was, would this work at all on a podcast? And it's one of several poems that are quite lengthy. What do we do? What do we do? So this really is an experiment, right? And I'm loving the way that it's calling into question, stage, page, morality, literacy, time, attention. Like it's moving across these communicative issues, and also told a really creepy, monstrous story. I mean, like, my goodness, this woman's face, her lips are stitched shut, and there's a frog tongue in there. Right? Like, what?
That's what's happening.
About the frog tongue. What do we make of the frog tongue?
I was wondering, like, what the metaphor of all
Yeah,
this
me
is.
too. Because on some level, I think it brings her as like a creature rather than like a human. So
I think it's just the way her tongue is. She's
just descriptive.
She's weaving, and she's just doing these sort of subconscious, automatic flits with her tongue that look kind of creepy, but it's not.
Is there like a
you think there isn't a frog tongue?
No, it's just the way she's like flipping her tongue, the way
Mm.
they're busy with their hands and their bodies doing these other things.
But do you think
Okay, why is her mouth sewn shut? If it's not to keep that frog tongue in.
Because she's got smoking wrinkles and she's just tight-lipped and just her mouth is just.
Oh, you're reading that as a metaphor as well?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Huh.
I don't find the stuff like stitched lips and stuff don't creep me out or anything. I think it's just, it just kind of turns me off. But if it's her real face making these sort of grotesque shapes, because people do that. Like when guitar players play, they don't realize the faces they make.
Sure.
They just make
like dancing.
Some of them do.
so? Then
No, it's all. I mean, I grew up around guitar players. You just make stupid. I mean, like you can exaggerate it, but like if you're sitting around the house, a guy I used to play with used to make these weird sort of robot faces, and he was making them, but he used to really creep me out.
Robot faces?
His face would become kind of dinosaurish, and his mouth would twitch.
Dinosaur-Robot?
Yeah.
Okay, wait, stop, Tim, please. I can't see you, and I'm not in the room. But could you please make whatever face you're making, like for the ladies?
Yeah, his breathing would become kind of staccato, and he'd go like.
Oh, okay. That's what you made.
Would you do that on a video? And we'll put it on the podcast?
Post it along. I think we're calling this episode is Dinosaur-Robot now, right?
Dinosaur-Robot issue. Yeah, it's the Dinosaur-Robot episode.
Wait,
perfect.
Dinosaur-Robot state.
If someone wants to see the frog tongue, I mean, it's their business. That's their. I mean, it's what I see, and I think there's enough in here for someone to have two different images.
Sure.
Which is nice.
You guys, isn't there a line in there that she stitched her own mouth closed? I feel
No, but she asked, why don't you take these out? The little girl asked her, why don't you take these out?
No image for me ever got boring faster than the lip stitches.
Really?
Yeah.
really.
Huh.
That was the best
To me-
image to me.
Oh, she
Yeah,
blocked. I
liked
found
I
it.
liked it once, and then the second time I was like, snore.
The next to the last stanza, smack in the middle. He peered closely to each loose stitch, searching beyond her
Yeah,
lips
I'm out.
for whatever monster she'd locked
She locked so poorly inside.
inside. So she
Oh, you're
did
right.
her own mouth shut.
All right, so I get it. Like, so she has all these secrets, or she has all these ugly things inside of her. So she sits her mouth shut so that she can never open up to somebody, and the kids.
Yeah, I still don't see the stitches. I see the stitches.
That's so funny. But I think, Tim, you're right. I think that there's like some spaciousness in the poem for multiple readings, right? But I come down on it. I think it's a little bit more on the magical realism side. Like I am believing in a frog tongue stitched up in there, like an actual thread stitches, not the sort of cigarette pucker, which I totally get, right? Like I get now that you've described it that way, right? That it's sort of like, you know, those sort of like vertical wrinkles in a mouth, right? That makes it look like stitches. I get that would work. But if this feels a little bit more like a fable and a little magical realistic to me,
Marion, you know what I'm thinking about is that we read the whole suite before we.
I know. It's true. So I'm thinking I'm bringing a little more knowledge, right? I'm
feeling like if you read the whole quote unquote story of it, narrative of it, you might have different feelings.
So wait. When he opens her lips, he found no monster, just a hint of pink tongue in the second to last stanza. So I guess it's not a frog tongue?
Well, we don't know yet. He's still just looking inside he's still just going like that, right?
But you see the pink tongue, though.
Right. But it could still, she's
could
still
be
sewn shut. It could still be rolled up.
Oh, you're right.
Right?
Okay.
She's not released yet.
Yeah. But you know what? It's so funny. Like I like the uncertainty now. At first I was really wanting to push against Tim saying, oh, no, it totally has to be a monster tongue up in there. But no, like maybe there is a little like, and maybe that's part of the strength of the poem that it's actually doing, you know, I don't know, like bringing both of those possibilities together. Huh.
Kids also see things sometimes with a little bit of magic realism. I mean, I saw things when I was a kid. When I grew up, I think I have to totally revise what I saw or think. Of course, I grew up in Alabama.
But you know what? I want to jump in and go. So I think it was Lauren or Caitlin. You were talking about this female character that she is. What did you call her? That she's a creature.
Yeah, I just thought,
Can you say more about that?
Yeah, well, I just got like the imagery of like, you know, I was getting like a frog and she kind of like jumps around. Her movements are jerky, and I don't know, maybe like like Frankenstein type of creature was what I was like kind of, I don't know.
I can see that with the mouth stitches.
Right. And then just like the jerkiness and like I don't know, it seemed like.
I'm imagining some sort of like Tim Burton-esque.
Right. Yeah.
You guys, doesn't she have a good heart? She's a nice lady.
This lady?
This lady's a nice lady.
Yeah.
She loves hearing the kids laugh.
Yeah, you can look like that without being like
Right. Okay, I'm just saying I don't think.
Well, and she's protecting them from her monstrosity, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, there's this weird way in which like this goes back and forth between. I mean, in most fairy tales, children are in danger, right? Like that's kind of the structure of a fairy tale is a child is in danger. And this is kind of moving back and forth with, you know, the sort of witch figure doing work to protect the children who are kind of interested in the monstrosity that lies inside her.
Right.
I'm sorry, go ahead, babe.
No, I was just going to say that, which, you know, the duality of that position, right? That she's, you know, sort of witch and protector, right? Monster and protector or human, like, you know, like pulling Tim's point into this. What do you make of that last line then? You know, that her answer to them is maybe.
Yeah, that's, I wanted to go there next. That's exactly where I was going to go. I don't like that to end on that word. That bugs me a lot. Feels very much like a bump ending. Like, honestly, again, this wasn't work once you're in it, but like when I the same thing, Jason, I had the poem for a while. Marion found them, read these poems. Every time I went to, it wasn't a good time because I couldn't give them a speed read. I had to really hunker in. So I put this, I keep using the wrong word. It didn't feel like labor, but I settle down, I give it this time. And then my joke at the end is maybe, like, that's what I get. That's my payoff. Bugged me.
Yeah.
How did
So
I
wait, can you just say more about that? Like, why does it feel like a joke, or why does maybe bug you?
Because the whole thing was trying to get this woman to say something, the whole piece. Mm-hmm. And then what she finally says is maybe. It just seemed lame, to be honest, like a lame bump.
Right.
I didn't see it that way. I mean, I thought it was because I think that, right, whenever I'm talking about ambiguity to students, my point is that ambiguity is not, it's open-ended, that ambiguity is about multiple positions that cannot settle, right? That can always be these multiple things. And so I kind of enjoyed the maybe as a kind of signal of the ambiguity, is that there are like multiple ways to read this piece, and that that this figure isn't even really sure why this is all happening. That, like, even though she's in control and she could take out the stitches but doesn't, there remains this kind of inability to settle into what that means.
So let me ask just a quick question. If it's going to be ambiguous and it's going to end with a maybe, I don't know the answer to this, but would it be possible to lop off that last stanza and then say, and then you'll tell us your name? Because that also implies that perhaps the answer is still going to be maybe.
I was thinking something like that.
Or I was thinking of taking it all the way up to, I was thinking of taking it all the way to verbal a sound. And she worked her mouth from side to side, and by degrees opened her lips enough to burble a sound.
I put the same thing, Kathy. I crossed out that said maybe, and
burble a sound. We still don't know what she said, do we?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So I totally respect the impulse to cut it, but I would disagree, and I do, because of everything that Tim pointed out, that if there's confusion that this is a human woman with wrinkles or a creature / witch, right? Then that ambiguity, like the possibility is dual, and it's in the piece. Whether she's protecting these kids or she's going to harm these kids, it's a little creepy and potentially both things, right? So the maybe is actually sitting right in the center of those possibilities. And imagine your mouth stitched shut, and what can you say? Try to say maybe. It actually works in your mouth. Right? Like,
I just don't think you need to go all the way to maybe. Just burble a sound gives it everything Jason asked for in the ambiguity part.
Well, Marion,
and is less like, I don't like that she's been this warm. Maybe this is part of it. She's been warm and enjoying these kids and playing a game where they're guessing her name, and then teases them at the end. That it's kind of mean to go, maybe I'll tell you, maybe I won't.
I don't think I read it as that either. Yeah. I didn't read her as warm necessarily. I read her more as like
creepy.
Yeah, creepy.
Ambiguous.
Yeah.
I don't know. She's hanging out. They're touching her. Would they feel comfortable hugging her, putting their hands on her face? I don't think she can be so creaturey.
I think
you guys.
Well, she says like slack jaw, and then like the part short bursts of air through her nose. That makes me think of a horse. Like
she
when she's talking about like,
so she doesn't get a mouth.
Right, but that was her laugh, was like short bursts of air through the nose, and like that just gave me the image of like a horse. So
darling, her mouth is so shut.
I understand.
When you laugh, you go ha 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 with your moido.
So wait, listen. All I'm trying to say is usually I'm down with like cutting if we need like extraneous stuff, extra stuff that doesn't serve the poem. I actually can see how the poet would make the case that maybe actually serves the ideas in this poem, right? And especially if she is in any way monstrous, right? And if monsters are, not just like border crossers, but people like the creature that lives in the middle of shit, right? Like in that no man's land of a boundary, that's the maybe, right? So I just, yeah. So that's my 2 cents.
Wait. What she reminds me of, like what we were talking about, Lauren was saying about the ambiguous nature of her, not necessarily good or bad. I think that's what you were implying. I'm thinking about like, in like Despicable Me, how he like doesn't really want these kids, but they're still there, and he kind of warms up to them. Like that's what I'm imagining. You know what I mean? Like she's
well, that's okay.
Yeah, but I don't think she's maybe fits her. She's like maybe like she still doesn't want to be like necessarily like this warm person, but she also is starting to open up herself, even though she's had her mouth sewn shut all these years.
I still don't think the mouth is sewn shut. I think she looks grotesque to the little kids. Because the little kids all look grotesque, and even the grandmother, you look at her, sometimes you just stand and look at her face, and you think, what happened to her?
I really like the image of like cigarette lips that you said. That's
the difference between someone who's 80 and 5 is tremendous.
Okay.
And so I think, and I think they're bizarre and they're kind of distant. And I think I don't dislike the last paragraph, and I don't necessarily dislike maybe. I'm okay with her toying with him, but I just think there's the poem. What I'm seeing in it is the distance between the playfulness of kids and the playfulness of adults. I mean, of elderly, and how different they are, but how sometimes they still work. Sometimes they don't work, because usually you have a nice grandmother and a mean grandmother. Sometimes the nice grandmother's game for it, and she sits there and toys with the kids. The other one,
Listen,
just get off their lawn.
I've been trying really hard to not say this, and we don't have, all the time in the world. We do have to read a second poem, but I have to put this in the mix. I think there's a chance she's not real at all. Well, she's inside their fort.
Yeah.
Weaving baskets.
Why would they imagine this?
Why would they imagine? Why wouldn't they imagine it? There was no internet at the time.
I like it a lot more, actually. Inside the children's fort. I'm serious.
This is not what I imagined as a child.
Then her mouth can be stitched, and she can't maybe. She can do both, because if she's not real, then she can say maybe with a stitched mouth.
Right.
Anything can then.
Yeah, she's in the shadow space of the tree.
Just try to say maybe with your mouth closed.
I do it every day.
You guys, do you think we should read, even though we don't have all of them, should we read the second one and get more of a sense of the tone and the woman and all of these things?
Yeah, I think we should. I was wondering what the strategy was going to be. I think that's actually a good one for this project.
Lauren is dying to read it, if that's cool.
Go, Lauren.
Okay.
All right. Chapter 7, She Grows a Second Heart. That night she woke to find another oddity. During sleep, her heart had split or twinned itself, and where one muscle pumped before, now beat two. Her blood coursed through her veins twice as fast as before, and over those paths her skin buzzed and stammered like wire strung tautly between two poles and charged with load. As if she'd run for miles across rolling hills, as if inside her chest two fists beat time all day. Beneath the bone she sped at death in the most alive way. The day crawled while her two hearts raced. Above the fire she set a series of clocks to ticking. She watched the flames, sometimes leaning close enough to feel the heat singe her stitches a deeper shade, their fibers scorching until they curled like dark frost spilling from her mouth. But when her hearts began to flicker more and faster than she could stand, she turned her eyes to the clock's marked faces and drew comfort from the second hand's neurotic twitch. Every minute witnessed meant another minute lived. Beneath her breastbone, her strange second heart pulsed harder. She sensed the muscle like her tongue would leap and fly away from her body if her body let it go. She took the silver-handled knife and incised a cross above the cavity where her hearts ballooned together, jostling for room and dominance. The flaps of skin, pale as eggshell, trembled slightly. A head appeared, A bird with obsidian eyes emerged wet with her blood, shook to shed its burden, and leapt toward the rafters above. She watched the bird and felt air seep into the space it left behind. Her single heart unrivaled but lonely in its great room. The wound bled slowly, healing fast to a pale silver scar, flaps falling back to close neatly over the bone, which laid itself again like lines of track or scaffolding across her chest. The bird flew to the windowsill and ticked its head to look back at the woman. A slight breeze, cool and calm, caressed its dark wings, and it leapt for the steady branch of that arm.
Wowza, thank you.
Nice reading. Nice reading, Marion.
Really well done.
So now what do you think?
The children aren't even in this one.
Yeah.
I'm kind of a sucker for things like the multiverse. So poems about someone growing a second heart is kind of sort of down with that. Start. And the idea of...
Wait, what does that mean, Tim Fitz? What does that mean?
Well, I guess I see this, I'm looking at these poems through this lens of this person who's old. And as I age, I find myself sort of having these two different minds where I think of all the things that I wanted to do and all the things that I've done and all these different patterns. And I feel like, and I also hear stories about when people pass away of old age that sometimes they pack their bags or my wife's grandmother, before she passed away, she wouldn't eat for the last 3 days and said that they were coming for her. And these types of things where, again, I don't see this as literal. I see just this sort of pre-death almost, as if her self passes away, and the what's left is this shell in a way. So I love all that stuff, and I don't know if that's just me, but the stitches, is this the face stitches again? Because I hate it. I can't describe it. I hate face stitches. And it's a turnoff. So the whole point, the rest of the poem, I'm just saying, forget the face stitches. But I don't think it is, but so I see these like two selves inside the one self. And I like that idea of these multiple people inside single people.
My God.
What was the sigh?
Because I'm thinking about that night she woke to find another oddity. Like this poor woman went to bed one night and woke up with a frog tongue the next morning. And so she had to stitch her mouth closed. Now she went to bed and she woke up with two hearts.
Well, one of them's a bird that she can release.
Well, I still see the frog tongue as I find that sometimes people's words when they get older mean less. Sometimes a lot of times grandparents are just, I'm from Florida where they stick them away in these homes with these boxes filled with old people, and they just treat them like children. You see all the activity boards at the nursing homes. It's like, learn how to read. And they treat them like children, and there's cartoons and sing-alongs. And we were visiting a friend of ours in a nursing home last year, and this woman sat in the corner of the room screaming, "Get me out of here!" But her voice was so raspy, it was just like, "Get me out of here! Get me out of here!" No. And like nobody would pay any attention to it. The orderlies, the nurses, and I kept thinking, she's probably been doing that for 20 years. Just sitting there, and no one will do anything about it. I might have said to the orderly, maybe can someone take her back to the room? And then, she always says that. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like the frog tongue is just how, when people hear that, it's people's view of old people sometimes of just some useless being. That's not saying how I view them, but as society views them. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's horrific to think of that's where we're all going.
I mean, that's not the metaphor I would have read the poem with, but I think that works in like the larger scheme of things. I was going to say that in a lot of ways, I like chapter 7 for being so contained that, unlike what chapter was it? Unlike chapter 6, which seems to be kind of like just started media res and then to end kind of like with the story still continuing. Chapter 7 is a much more, kind of like start to finish story that really is self-contained. But I really like the way the bird, the way the heart becomes the bird and is escaped. I think you can read it as Tim is reading it. I think it works as a metaphor for that, but I think it works as a metaphor for a lot of other things too.
Yeah, and I like poems so my background is fiction and I'm wired for fiction. So when I read a poem like this, I like poems that let me build a story around it and have a really firm foundation. And then a poet can read it from their point of view. So poems that allow for a number of different types of reading, I think, are things that I try to teach my creative writing classes. So this is what we want to shoot for, or something we should shoot for.
I'm looking at this and seeing something I didn't see before. What's amazing is this, let's talk about it like it's real for a second. This shit happens to her, like she wakes up with a frog tongue and she seals her own mouth closed. And my read on that is because, a frog goes, right? And she doesn't want to be doing that, right? So she cuts herself to release this heart. Like that's really fascinating too. She's very strong in ways, right? Shit goes down and she manages it as best she can. This insane stuff is happening to her. Yeah, like she's
that's the metaphor I would be reading with.
Right?
That is how I saw the poems. That this woman is sort of confronted over and over again with these monstrous developments, and I certainly find parts of myself monstrous, and I love the physicalization of them.
I think I just saw something interesting. Tim was talking earlier about didn't you mention like the birds and the clocks? Did you say something about that? No, I'm making that up. Maybe I thought you were
thinking those.
Maybe
things.
I was already thinking that. But you said something about it being imagined and in different times. That's what it was. You were talking about
the two ways of thinking.
Right. Yes. And so I was connecting that with the clock imagery. And then down in the last stanza, the bird flew to the windowsill and ticked its head. I think the ticked is like significant there. So maybe that's like that is the whatever incarnation of her, like, whatever wishes of another time or a different way that it could have been.
Right. Like every minute witnessed meant another minute lived with the time again.
Right. Mm-hmm. How about that? It left for the steady branch of that arm. Mm-hmm. Does it fly back into her? Does it fly back into the room and land on her arm?
I don't know, because there hasn't been a tree yet, right?
No, I looked and looked for the tree. Right. Tree outside the window. And we don't ever call branches arms, do we?
Or that arm like
the arm of a tree.
To death, like
I think people call branches arms, but I still think that it's hers. Like I underlined it.
The bird does come back.
Yeah. And the personifications of the clock faces earlier, I feel like that's what they're playing on at the end.
Mm-hmm. Okay, does that help us at all? Does reading 7 help us with 6?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Because one is very open-ended and the other is really self-contained.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to. I'm curious about the whole.
Yeah, now I want to read the series.
Chapter. Yeah.
Well, we'll have to see, won't we? How much of this we'll be sharing with you?
How many chapters is it? Chapter 1 to.
Well, I don't think we have all of it right now.
Oh, we don't? Okay.
No, we don't. We have like a selection of them. And it's really funny how this worked out too. She submitted for the monsters issue. And she's like, included a couple of the poems in the batch, if I recall, of her original submission. And then as we were putting the podcast together, I asked, would you happen to have more of these? And I think maybe one or two had been accepted elsewhere. And then she sent us more from the suite. And I can remember at our Klingon Council meeting in Philadelphia at a happy hour, being sort of staggered by the flow, like one next to the other, next to the other, next to the other. I really would, my hope was to hear what I just heard, which was this great group of minds thinking about the sense these poems are making, right? And it's a delight to hear it. And I don't know what the answers are. Like, I don't actually, I don't know what the definitive answer is, but it's I think, a wonderfully creepy universe. And she fills it with ambiguity, craft.
Kathy's going to grab some water.
Yeah. So poor girl. It's tough getting a cough. Speaking of which, this is a total non sequitur, but I'm fighting a cold here too. And I have a bag of Hall's cough drops sitting in front of me on my desk that my cat is persisting on eating. So she's been like grabbing the bag off the desk and kicking them around like little hockey pucks for the last 5 minutes. And I thought for sure you were going to be able to hear her. Eating cough drops. So anyway, so I guess the next question for us as
break, Marion. I'm gonna have to edit that part out. So let's just get right to the point right before that, and then we'll pick it up.
Okay. So where were we right before she left? We were just talking about the backstory. Just right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So ultimately then, right, on that backstory about she sent us this longer more poems from the series. Suddenly we were enthusiastic about the series and the universe that she was creating through these long narrative poems. And poems like the one that we just read. So they're in, separate chapters. So the question for us is, do we want to publish them? If we do we want to publish several of them? And how to go about making that decision.
Right.
I definitely think they're stronger together.
I agree. Yeah. I liked the first poem, but I liked it better once I had read the second.
I think 3 or 4 is the sweet spot.
I would say that.
Just like the sonata form. 3 or 4 movements and move on.
Call it a day.
That's great.
So it sounds like we're leaping right into saying that aren't we doing these one at a time? Are we going to say weeks? How are we doing the voting part, Mayor?
I know that's the kooky part. So let's talk about it as Klingons talk about these things. We could vote on the pair here. We could vote on them individually. And I don't know how to do it.
I'm guessing you can't vote with or without the face stitches.
No, they're in there. They're too interwoven.
That's a great pun. That's a great pun. But do you?
I think there's a little more love for 7 than 6. So I would say let's vote on 7, and then let's vote on 6.
Okay.
All right. Thanks for taking control there, Jason. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, vote.
Sorry.
We're waiting for. Okay, so it is not unanimous, but it's in.
Yay.
It's almost unanimous. All right, so fabulous. Congratulations, Sarah Gutowski, on getting in She Grows a Second Heart. And now let's vote on The Children Have a Request. Are we ready? 1, 2, 3, vote. And again, not unanimous, but in. Almost unanimous. No. All right, so we have 2 for sure, and we'll cling on the others that we have and see if we hit that sweet pot of 3 or 4.
And these are for monsters, right? We're putting this in the monsters.
Yes,
We are putting this in the monsters issue, yeah. Although the more I spend time with this lady, the less I think she's a monster. I think freaky shit happens.
Laura Nightfield are monsters, but that's okay.
Freaky shit.
Does it happen with every monster you spend time with?
Well, I think that's
like Grover's a monster or Elmo's a monster, and that's the whole point of their monsters.
Edwards in their hands.
Stray monsters.
I'm gonna start bringing home stray monsters.
Like once you love the monster, they're no longer.
If somebody's going to start leaping into that song "Tale as Old as Time," isn't that Beauty and the Beast?
Yeah. I was thinking Edward Scissorhands, but
Edward Scissorhands. Caitlin, that's awesome.
Really going for it.
it is. That's what they remind me of. You should make these into a movie.
Great.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, okay then. I think we're good. We did it. Thank you everybody for being here, and
Well done.
thanks to our listeners for listening. Anybody have anything to say before I do our sign off spiel?
Can I interject something?
Of course, sound engineer.
Haven't you read The Dark Tower by Stephen King?
Yes.
Is it more Dark Tower or is it more Sound and Fury?
I'm thinking it's more Dark Tower.
What, Mare? Sorry.
It's funny, Joe, you said that. I think that's a great continuum, right? Like at one end is it Faulkner, at the other end is it the Dark Tower. I think it's more like Dark Tower, right? I think it's going in that direction. I think that's, but I love that it's a question, right? Like, so, depending on the number of the poems that we publish, like representing the universe that she's creating, I wonder what the reader's going to think. Are they going to think, right, Dark Tower or Faulkner?
Sorry, it just popped in.
No, that's great.
Way to go, Joe.
Right. Maybe that's the title for this episode. All right. Thanks to our listeners for listening. Remember, go to the corresponding Facebook event page and tell us what you think about this episode. Write us directly if you'd like about anything at all. We're thinking about some upcoming episodes, and one of them could be answering your questions.
That's good. Yeah.
Extra, so feel free to ask away. And remember, the work we discussed today is available for you to view on our website, pbq@drexel.edu. Send us a SAISY, and we'll send you a self-addressed stamped envelope. Ask your grandparents what a SAISY is. Subscribe to our podcast, rate us, and keep reading. Thank you.
Yay.
This podcast is the property of Painted Bride Quarterly Magazine. All rights reserved.